our next panel, and then after this we're going to break for lunch, and we have one more panel after that. It's about post-production and the investment that goes into that, but also what post-production looks like on the continent. Again, Africa's ready and open for business. World, I hope you're paying attention. And the reason why we're talking about this is because, even as South Africa, we have a post-production incentive, and sometimes that's misunderstood. So how do we access that? What do we have to do? Does it benefit the post-production industry? What are the different elements of post-production? Everyone just thinks it's just about editing and then that's it, but there's actually lots of different, and there's a depth to this particular side of the industry. So I'm gonna call up Ntokozo to introduce her panel. And Ntokozo, if you can come and join us on stage here, you can introduce the rest of your panel. But we do have Alastair from Refinery, and we do have Melissa Parry, who's an editor herself. We also have Tongai, Furusa from 1410th, and we also have online Tunde, but more on them, Ntokozo.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for waiting for us for this particular panel. We know we're running a bit late. I'd like to introduce our panel for today. May I please ask Alastair to please come on stage. He's an accomplished filmmaker, and he's played a pivotal role at the Refinery, a post-production facility, which also now deals with they've got 12 offline suites and 2 grades theaters, and they deal with VFX. And I'd also like to call Melissa Parry to stage, a seasoned editor, award-winning editor, who has worked on productions such as Queen Sono, Classified, Murder of a Soccer Star. And I'd also like to welcome on stage Tongai Furusa. On stage, he is the co-founding partner of post-production facility 1410 Digital, which is a post-production facility that specializes in commercials, music, videos, and corporate documentaries and feature films. And online, we are joined by Tunde. Tunde, I hope I do not butcher your surname. Tunde Ogundipe. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Welcome, he's online. He is a filmmaker specializing in commercials as well, coloring, grading, and VFX, and we're going to be having a conversation about the finishing product of post-production. Please give them a round of applause. Right, I'd like to start with you, Alastair. You started your company and now you Refinery, which has been in the industry for years. And now you're doing VFX, which some could see as a new way of going into post-production, but also in looking at how we edit and how we send our products to the industry and to the market. What has changed from when you started Refinery to where you are now, and how you've evolved?
So I never started Refinery. I'm not that old. I'm not that old. That company's been passed around through a lot of people. We started a little company called The First Order, and we gradually saved up and managed to buy that facility. But I'd say what the big thing is with the VFX industry is why it's grown is, I'd say, with the advent of digital cameras, actually. Like, people are not taking the time on set to shoot as meticulously as they were with film. So when you're shooting on film, you're paying per foot, very expensive to process, you need to get it right. In South Africa, with the digital revolution here, like, we just managed to shoot, we'll just shoot non-stop, wires in frame, lights in shot, that kind of thing. So visual effects almost became a necessity for us, like, to clean up our mistakes. Whereas overseas, they were busy playing with the cool toys and making like golems and that kind of stuff. We had an in with VFX by cleaning up our mistakes. And I think that's how things have kind of built, and we've used that skill set to slowly grow into, like, not powerhouse players. I wouldn't say we even B players, but we're like C players, but there's a place for that in the global market. I think that's where we're sitting at the moment.
Okay, and then I'd like to move to you, Tunde, online. Tongai, online. You're also in the VFX space. How do you think we fare as Africa as a continent, taking our products to the market, and how do we fare in terms of the post-production aspect of what we do?
Hi everyone. I think we've come a long way. I do remember there used to be a time, just as Alistair mentioned, there was a time when we cleaned up stuff, but I think we're also moving space where we actually do proper VFX stuff, where things, but then not majorly for Africa. We have VFX artists in Africa doing VFX stuff for United States, for example, or other international countries and stuff like that. But I think we've come a long way, and VFX has been around for quite some time. And I'm not, we may not have a lot of VFX artists in Africa at the moment. We do have animators transitioning into VFX because for us it's quite different. The journey is quite different for a lot of us in Africa. I, for example, I came from an animation background, 2D, 3D animation before coming into VFX. And then now I'm color grading and finishing. But then I think that's majorly in most of the African countries, you'll always find someone coming into VFX from an animation background. And yes, we're still largely still fixing things because a lot of people feel like you can always fix all the problems in post. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the mistake we make in pre-production, even when shooting. We always assume that you can fix it in post, which is not something that is quite ideal. Melissa, you are a seasoned editor, and over there you've worked on numerous projects. What are some of the things that you wish as South Africa, or as an editor actually, that production companies can actually consider? Seeing where we are, where you started, because I know there's technologies that have evolved over time, but where we come from and where we are, what are the things that you wish we could consider in production before the content gets to you, and not fixing it in post like we sometimes do?
I think for me, my focus as an offline editor specifically is story. It's always the guiding force to how I'm making decisions, how I'm critically absorbing, analyzing information from performance to camera movement to music choices, like whether they drive the narrative or not. I think a script can be amazing, but there will be challenges in production that force a director, producer, DOP to make choices they didn't necessarily anticipate. Maybe it's suddenly raining. Now you're like, what do we do? We're supposed to shoot all these outdoor scenes. So you decide to shoot green screen for the day. You know, like that's a massive like shift of gears, like not only from a creative point of view, but a budget point of view. Yeah. But I don't know if I've answered the question, but to circle back, like, I think it's always about having the conversation and understanding what choices you're making and how those are going to ripple and what outcomes are going to, like, be on the other side, and evaluating the possibility of the solutions you can choose from, so that you can always get the best story.
Yeah. I have a friend who's a DOP and that always says it always starts and ends with the story. If you find yourself stuck, ask yourself, what's the story? So that's a really good point. So I'd like to ask Alastair, from your perspective and the projects that you guys have worked on, have you ever worked on incentives? And even you, Tongai, I think any of you can take this question. Have you ever had a project that has helped with incentives from a post-production perspective, and how has that looked like?
Yeah, I mean, we have. It's a tricky one because, like, we do get incentives in South Africa, and like we're obviously grateful for the incentives that we get. But yeah, honestly, like currently we're losing out with the DTR rebates at the moment. We used to lose work to India Now we're losing work to Canada. We're losing work to London. I mean, these places were substantially more expensive a few years ago, but like now we can't compete with them. Their rebate structures are far more reliable. They're much higher. We're struggling with the rebates here.
Yeah, I mean, I think I echo your sentiments. I think for us, we're more of a, obviously in post-production, people think about us last, you know? So normally these conversations about incentives are happening with production. I think it is something that we need to look into, maybe, you know, finding out ways how post-production can actually get into the conversation a bit earlier, and be able to, you know, to get incentives, even though it's a production of a production company. Do you know what I mean? Because we just don't have the opportunity to get to those conversations. You know, we deal with the budgets that we get from the production, and I think it would actually help us. I mean, I always say a lot that post-production is a place where, you know, people look to save as well. You know, I think because of its nature, that the film is now in a controlled environment. You know, you'll either go over extra days or you'll ask for more things, and it's kind of like we don't have a choice but to finish the film. You know, so I think it is a place where I don't know, the DTI or whoever does these incentives needs to kind of like look into and say, you know what, when post does start, especially on most of the productions that are happening, can we have a conversation with your post? And maybe, you know, that way those incentives might work for us better. I don't know if I'm making sense.
And include us in pre-production,
Yeah.
I would say. We don't have to be saved until the end. We can contribute to the storyboard. We can contribute to the script even, you know, we've got shortcuts, we've got techniques, we've got SOPs that we can provide so that we don't have to fix these things in post.
Correct.
I mean, an editor is also, just by reading a script, can quite quickly see what potentially will fall away on the edit room floor. I mean, I attended a panel a few weeks back. It was a line producer and a post supervisor, and they were talking about their relationship from pre-production. Post is like 10 to 30% of the entire budget. Like, are you considering that? How are you working together in pre-production and production to make sure that you can find cost savings, bring it into post, because you will run over. You'll end up with all kinds of cleanups you never thought you'd have, and other creative things that emerge.
So let me ask you this. I know it's a conversation that needs to start with production when the production starts. Is there a base as post-production facilities and service providers to actually create something that would get you to that point where you have the engagement with your DTIs? Because I know that they are there to support the industry, and that's great. We love our bodies, government bodies. Please still continue to support us. But as an industry, what can we do also? Because I know it's a conversation. I'm in production now. I've started the conversation with post-production to say, listen, this is what we're doing. This is what I'd like to do. How do you think we can approach it? But is there, as an industry, do you think that you can start the conversation sooner from not only how the process would work, but how it can incentivize you as with doing post-production and even with your business and how we can move it forward?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question you're asking, because if you look at it, post-production again, especially with Alastair, who runs a facility, and I'm sure he knows this, there's lots of productions that he's saved. Do you know what I mean? It's also with us, Nelisa, my producer, sitting over there, a lot of productions come to you with a certain amount of budget. All right. And that budget might not necessarily be efficient to do the post-production, but again, it's saving the production, right? But the problem then comes to grow the post-production industry. And I think that's the other thing. If we always look at it as just growing the film industry, we never look at, okay, let's grow the post-production space, right? Yeah. So a conversation like that with the DTI or around, okay, if let's say we have incentives for post-production, what does that actually do to it, right? So now Alastair, who says he's competing against and 1410th and Melissa as well, competing against these international guys. We actually, I think of all the production, part of production, invest back into post with what we get. So we need to, because we can't stay alive, right? So for there to be an incentive for post means that then we begin to grow better VFX, we begin to grow better sound, we begin to grow better colorists, editors, and that kind of thing, so that we then can compete internationally. Because it may be, you were saying it's 30% of the budget, but post is actually maybe 50-60% of the whole film. That's the way I see it.
On screen.
On screen, do you know what I mean? Because there's a lot happening, right? There's the storyteller, one. Then from there, there's the audio narrative. Then you've got the colorist. Then you've got the VFX. You know what I mean? There's
Online editor.
Online editor. There's a lot happening there. Just to get the film, onto the screens, right? So that if that space keeps getting low budgets, right, and not getting the type of investment that it needs, it's going to cripple the industry eventually, right? Because there's no space for growth there. It's always a space to save. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to a space to go, okay, we need to grow this space, and then we all win together. So I don't know if that's how incentives work. But I guess they need to meet with us if they want to do a post-production incentive. It doesn't make sense meeting with the producers. That's
They
how
can
I feel.
approach us with an equity deal as well, but it's like they've given that up. It's like if we're becoming investors in the film, we also want a return on that investment. And that's seen as something that's very sinful to ask for. It's very insulting to go, all right, well, if I'm putting in, this amount of post, then surely I can be a part of your waterfall recoupment later. And I think that's not an unfair ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also, it's also quite funny to see how I'm not mentioning any department, well, mostly production, when they have a low budget film, they get the production team involved in a small budget film because you don't have the money to do anything. But then when it becomes a bigger budget, you just completely forget about them. It seems like, I'm not sure how to explain it. I don't even know why you would want to forget a post-production team that helped you finish a low budget film or a short film, and you forget them when you get to a bigger budget film. And I often think when I have the chance to actually talk to producers, I realize there's also this fear of the unknown to say, oh, post-production is quite expensive. But then one thing that a lot of people don't understand is post-production, say for example, VFX, can actually save your film because you're thinking of a particular way of shooting a particular scene. And you're thinking, like Melissa made mention, you need a green screen because you're going to do this. And then you consult a VFX supervisor or producer and tells you, like, you actually don't need a green screen. You can actually do a practical effects. And it saves you money in post, because when you get into post with VFX, you can only add on to that. You don't necessarily have to spend more money to fix the shot. You're actually enhancing the shot, which is way better than just trying to recreate everything on a no budget kind of thing. So I think from concept, if you're asking where should we come in, I think we actually need to come in from concept, from ideas, and then bring us back in when you have script, so we can actually look through the script. I've only been on one production in South Africa that I actually sat down and I really enjoyed it. It was a series. I sat down with the post supervisor, producer, production designers, art department. We sat down and we actually created ways of making things work. And it saved us a lot of time in post that we actually didn't have to do anything. We only adding to certain things. We're not recreating things because we know we don't have the budget, we don't have the time for 3D renderings or VFX stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to add in there that I think all of us sitting here deal with this on a daily, almost daily, monthly kind of basis. So through experience, we've gained like shortcuts, ways of doing things like more efficiently. And you may have a DOP or production designer on your shoot that hasn't been through that process before. And so I always think collaboration is filmmaking's greatest asset. You know, it's an art form of collaboration. If you're not pulling your people in, you're gonna see flames sometimes and like end up spending a lot of money where you shouldn't have.
Okay, so we've talked about the small budgets. If you were to get a budget like a Marvel budget to edit and I just go crazy with editing, do you think that as an industry we have the software that is needed and also the skills? I know we do have the skill set that is needed. And from a Marvel perspective, if Marvel comes to shoot in South Africa and they want to collaborate with South African post-production and maybe collaborate with another African country, are those things possible for big budgets to do? Would that be something that we should be looking into as an industry?
Yeah, I mean, there are South African editors who've worked on Wolverine origin story, Megan Gill.
Black Panther, yeah.
Debbie Berman edited Black Panther, Captain Marvel, and Spider-Man Homecoming. I mean, what are we saying? We don't have the skills.
No, I'm asking.
No, I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying out there.
Yeah.
Like, why do we have this like negative perception about the talent we have?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a question of the talent that we have in South Africa. I think maybe in terms of the exposure that we could get as an industry, and as you're saying, factoring in that post-production is a very important element when it comes to the post-process. And having a big budget, what does that look like? If it was a local film, how does the time spent on a production look like versus I want to save on this production and I don't want to spend as much time on production. What does that look like with a bigger budget and as Tunde has said, in terms of I can actually show you where to save. How does that look like from a time perspective and from a budget? You said 56%. I know there are producers like, 50%, 56% might be a bit. But how does that look like from a time perspective? Is it a longer period to edit your story? Is it getting in more resource? Is it actually more interaction with your producers, your directors, and as you said, your crew and your script writers? How does that time process look like? Because also with development, they give you, if you get the incentive, you have to deliver within a certain time. After you deliver, then you get the money to go to the next step. How would that look like? How would you like it to look like on your end?
What is
with a bigger budget? Let's say if I gave you like, I don't know, 10 billion.
I don't want to talk about it in money terms, but like my perception is if you're going to shoot for 1 month, you're going to be an edit for 3 months, offline edit. And then you're going to go into, so it's at that kind of ratio. Like if you're going to spend a year shooting a Marvel movie, I reckon that's probably like the time frame that they take to shoot, 8 months to a year.
And then they reshoot it as well.
Reshoots are part of the plan. It's not like, oh, we got it in the can, make do. It's like an evaluation process of like, okay, this is working or that's not working, or this ending doesn't make sense. How are we going to fix it? Or are we going to go reshoot?
Yeah, so I think a good way to, so we've done a low budget alongside a better budget, and I'll tell you now that they both take the same amount of time, right? I think what's important is to go when, let's say, a Marvel or whoever comes, it's like, what are they looking for, right? So if they're looking for beginning offline editors, really good offline editors, you've got myself, you've got Melissa, You know what I mean? Alastair as well is an editor.
Thank you.
So
You don't have
as
to
well,
tell
I know you keep pushing him as VFX, yeah, but I know he cuts. And so we start there, right? We start with offline editors. Tick. Definitely offline editors that will deliver, we have, right? Then we can then obviously move on to, let's say, sound and final mixers, sound engineers. We have that, you know what I mean? Online VFX. We have the personnel, the skills that are internationally recognized, right? And I think that's what's important, because right now something really great is happening in South Africa in terms of post-production not being a one-man band, right? So the idea of specializing is becoming more and more prevalent. You know, you will find, like, you know, Alastair, like he said, when he started out his company, and myself as well, he probably did everything. You know, he was editing, grading, online, again, because of the budgets. Now you've got guys that are coming out of film schools or coming into the industry as just colorists. You've got guys that are coming in as just VFX. You know, you've got guys that are coming in as just offline editors, and staying and sticking to that. And I always say that to anybody that comes in my company, into the company, to say, you know what, specialize. Don't come here and say, I'm such an asset to the company and I can be this and that. Do you know what I mean? So our industry, in terms of post-production, is becoming very specialized. On top of that, we've got organizations that are actually behind all of this. So Melissa is a director at SAGE, South African Editors Guild. Myself, I'm an exec, and also Tunde is an exec there. But, you know, that's also organizations that are lobbying and in places for the benefit of an offline editor, for their rights, for their pay. So that specialization is there. Then there's also other new ones that are coming up for colorists and finishers and so on and so forth, right? And then there's for VFX. So again, this is why I say that we need to look at post-production separately, but together, right? To say, how do we keep growing this thing, right? Because all Marvel are really looking for are specialized people to do the job, right? Whether you're sitting here in South Africa or you're sitting there in America, the first thing that they're going to need is the personnel. And I can safely say South Africa definitely has the personnel to get the job done.
Yeah.
So Tongai, I kind of disagree with you.
Okay.
I do think, we've got the personnel, but like the first thing that Marvel is going to do is they're going to treat that raw footage as the most precious IP on the planet for them. You know, and we need the infrastructure, we need the firewalls, we need the protections, we need the trusted partner network commitment, which is like 2 million rand a year, you know, before we can even look at that footage, you know. It is an extremely expensive process to even look at that footage, you know?
Yeah, some facilities have introduced biometric entry points on every edit suite.
Yeah, like one of our workarounds is we just got a keyboard and a mouse and a screen, but our computer is actually sitting in LA. So it doesn't leave LA. The footage technically doesn't leave LA.
Sure.
To do the workaround, because like the footage won't sit in South Africa.
But also to sometimes have the CPU in a locked server room separate from the edit suite so that people can't access it or the USB flash points, right? But I think another element for me is you got to think about the expertise of the assistant editor, the post-production supervisor, the VFX editor. Those are support people to the editor being able to focus on what they do, which is tell the story. If you don't understand and trust the reasons why the editor needs the kind of like intensity of support they need, in a Marvel movie, maybe like up to 8 assistants in some instances, you know, well, you're going to not allow them to succeed.
Okay.
All doom and gloom, huh?
You know, I think like it's important here to just note an assistant editor is kind of like a misleading label for a job role. It's
Yeah,
not,
it is.
you
It's
know,
not an assistant.
It is.
yeah.
It's not an assistant editor.
It's an entirely different kind of job and execution of things that happen on a daily basis that some editors may not even know how to do because that doesn't fall in their like
Yeah.
space.
I don't think it's completely doom and gloom. I think there's room to improve. I think it's also about looking at the areas where we can improve and what we can do and start where we are. I know that you guys have highlighted the budgets. They're always small budgets. It should be 3 months, but unfortunately, and the budgets are not that great. I think also for producers also. I know I'm a producer, but I'm not.
No, and I think that's our advantage. is
Yeah.
We're very resilient. We've solved a lot of problems. We do stuff that American editors don't do. I've heard
Yep.
stories about American editors not laying music, not laying sound effects, doing the bare minimum to pass something. Whereas a South African editor will go the extra mile to make it work.
I think we do, varying from South African productions and international, there's way more resources that they have in places where we have to double up in South Africa.
But there's also union rules.
Yeah.
So I can't cross over and just do something on behalf of someone else if that's not my purview.
Yeah. Do you think that we've regulated that though?
Not
South
in our
Africa?
space, but within the American space and the UK space.
What would that look like?
I wouldn't be able to do an export.
Okay. You would like, I'm not doing it. No, but besides you, I'm saying from a regular, how would that look like? I know the industry largely is not necessarily regulated, right? To say that these are standard rules or these are standard rates specifically for post-production or for any resource. I know there's industries where, or there's resources within the production space where they say, with voiceover specifically, there's specific
the
rates that you use. How would regulating our industry look like? Because you are right, in America, they do have a union, they do have regulations. We are in a global market essentially because the content that we create plays on streaming platforms and that can land up in any country. It's dubbed and you can have content playing in Spain, in China, in a different language. You've edited for an international audience. What would regulating in terms of the resource and taking care of post-production and making sure that it grows, how would that look like for an editor, for an offline editor, for someone who runs a post facility? How would that look like from a regulation perspective?
I think it should be governed by the DTI. If you want the rebate, you've got to follow certain rules, like a producers guild, then a directors guild, then an editors guild, and you've got to follow all the lines of rules down the line. Like an editor needs to, a Sage editor needs to work for a directors guild editor, directors guild works for the producers guild, qualifies for the DTI. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think like I was saying earlier, the post-production space has it's been bringing itself up, basically, for a very long time. And if you'd want something like that, for regulations already within, so we have meetings every week or every second week within the South African Editors Guild about the industry. There's also SASFED, that's a collective of, the different bodies that also tries to talk about these things and bring some sort of regulation. Look, at the end of the day, I think it's the money guy, right? It's the guy with the money that runs, that you know what I mean? So, I think our broadcasters also need to come into play in a big way, and I'm talking now locally, in terms of, how they also give out the budgets, what they feel, and look at when the budgets are coming out. So everybody needs to come together to kind of get that right regulation that we're talking about. Because their demands are like, we've got a show, we want it on next week. Guys, you start shooting now. That's that's not regulated. You understand? And it starts there, then it just keeps filtering down. So I think everybody in the industry, especially the money guy, needs to come to the table. And we, you know, we've got the structures in place. We've got the SASFIs, we've got the SAGEs. We're here to talk and get this regulation going with the Department of Arts and Culture. And everybody's there. It's just how do we then get around the table, I guess, you know, and start the conversation. You can't start the conversation, but it is possible,
Yeah,
I guess.
I mean, we all have experience here with different kinds of studios overseas who like have processes in place that can be replicated or sort of molded to a South African context, right? We understand what schedules should look like versus what South African broadcaster constraints might expect. So if the broadcaster is not invested in the quality of the project, and the quality of the project is directly related to time, we're not going to match up.
Do you have anything to add, Tunde? I see you smiling there.
I was just laughing. I was laughing at someone else here, and I was laughing at the conversations there. I like what Tongai said about it's all about the money guy. And that is true, but it's also one of the reasons why we are where we are. I think when things are regulated, we need to be disciplined enough to carry through across every organization. And not that you may have enough money to just skip certain things. But then say, for example, you have Sage with a specific way of doing things. And this is how you treat editors. We also have it on our website. And these are the kind of conditions that we sort of suggest to producers and things like that. You need to consider that. So because you have this person cutting your film. And then producers, I believe you have yours as well. If we respect that and then you respect us, I think that's a starting point. And because you're seeing this person as just not a button pusher, but someone who's with the intellect coming to help you tell your story. And also when we are, I think, I can't remember who mentioned securities and stuff like that. Majority of post-production of post-production is about creativity. In as much as you may have post-production professionals who have background in network engineering and stuff like that, you need to completely outsource it. We need to completely outsource it to the specialized people that know how to do these things. Like we give examples of Hollywood, they have specialized people. You can't not break that firewall. You cannot find your film, an unfinished film, you cannot find it anywhere else. It's there. And that's the reason, just as Alastair mentioned, there was a time I was rotoscoping for a Canadian film. I think we were given proxies because we're just cutting out the film and we're making, we're converting the film to 3D format. And we only cut proxies and we view those proxies until the final product. And we still never have the film. Even when you're doing 3D works, you finish the work and there's a render farm somewhere in Australia or somewhere there, and they're rendering everything. So I think those are the kind of things we have them, just as Melissa mentioned, we have these kind of tools that I may have the tool, Melissa has a tool, Alastair has a tool, Tongai has a tool, but then it's only for me, I'm using it to make my work easier. I'm not willing to sell it to anyone and stuff like that. So I think we need to also, I'm not sure how to go about it. I'm sure the government or DTI would know about how to. But then when we have these regulations, certain things will fall in place. There are certain proprietary tools that I believe Refinery has that is not shared across anywhere else. But then you have companies like Industrial Lights and Magic, you have VFX companies like Company 3, they have these tools. and they commercialize it afterwards. But then it's also a way to help those organizations or these companies, like, okay, here's a tool that can help you out. Let's help you develop it and stuff like that. So I think when we regulate things across the board and we stick to it, I think that would really, really help the industry. Thank you.
Okay. I think from a regulation perspective, it's not solely rested on DTI. I know they have an obligation to the industry, but I always say production is a collaborative effort. So it's going to need us as an industry to work together and create a regulation that will work for the entire value chain.
But South Africans love racing to the bottom, eh?
Sorry?
We love racing to the bottom to outbid each other and all that kind of stuff.
True.
So we have to, it's going to have to take some kind of formal entity to control it.
You're right. But what I'm saying is it's not only rested on the DTI.
No.
It can't just be them.
No. All I'm saying is if they want the rebate,
yeah,
then they should play by the rules. The producers should play by the rules.
The producer should pay by the rules.
Yeah. And go, okay, this is a 60 million rand film. All right, cool. Then it's going to be 3 months in post. That's what, the regulation is, If it's a 5 million rand film, it's something else. I don't know what those regulations are. I'm on the spot here, but I think if you want the rebate, you got to put in some rules.
Okay. I'd like to take some questions from the floor. I don't know if you have questions. There's one question there. May I please have a mic?
Thank you for your insights that you've been given as the post-production kind of umbrella in South Africa. I'm Valente Bosch. I stem back from the time when the Refinery was still 6th Street Studios. But I need to be very cautious how I'm going to bring my thought that's going to lead into a question. Because at the time when post-production was at the high end of everything in South African production, we had the commercial sector doing TVCs, right? And that fed the big conglomerations like the refineries, like the video labs, and little companies like the Rapid Blues, that did all of the offlines before it went into online. So as the fact that Video Lab don't exist anymore, Refinery has come back after there was some sort of thing that happened a couple of years back, the big conglomeration of post-production has actually been shattered. So there's smaller little post-production companies. I don't know if Left still exists. Then there's your company, which is trying to make it. Refinery is coming back. But talking about the incentive, okay, for we as independent producers, we come to a post-production facility and your rates are set. So we negotiate a little bit here, we can negotiate a little bit there, but your price is there. Now we're talking about an incentive for post-production. That incentive, if we as an independent producer has received money from wherever we had to go and find that money, it is almost a sense of we need to guard what we can afford. So now this is where the thought process comes in, that many little production companies flanks off and start their own in-house post-production. And let me tell you, they're creating some stuff that makes your eyeballs bleed. That's how beautiful it is. Right? Now, brings us to the price. Why do we put all of our stuff to India or Canada when we have to do special effects? Because South Africa is too expensive. So that's the big problem we're having. And so as a producer and as a director, coming from a very strong post background, I find it difficult when I've got to go and do an 8-second shot that's going to cost me 800,000, and then I can get a freelance 3D animator and a VFX artist that can do it for me for 200,000, and still good. And unfortunately, that race down to the bottom of the pit becomes a reality because our budgets is not blockbuster budgets. We are talking, if we can raise 10 million rand as a film in South Africa, let me tell you, that's a feat for us as production independent producers. Commercials, a 30-second commercial I shot once for 5.5 million rand. We can't even do that for a short film in South Africa. Yeah. All right, so thank you. That was my thought. And I just wanted to ask, why then have we tanked as big post-production companies in South Africa? Thank you.
Okay, I feel like it was very much aimed at me. No, all good. Yeah, so look, those numbers that you're talking about, I wish we were getting those numbers. I wish we were getting 200,000 Rand for an 8-second shot. We don't have a set rate card anymore. We cannot compete with, we have to look at things on a project-by-project basis. We've got an ask price and we've got a take price. And we are open to negotiation with producers across the world on that. So that is something that Refinery needs to change its perception in the industry on, is that we are there for local filmmakers now. We are taking on much smaller projects. We're taking on SABC projects. We're taking on short films. We're taking on student films. We are changing our mindset to try and build up the industry. It is not what it was 10 years ago. There's no way someone like me could have bought Refinery what it was 7 years ago. Telecine days, gone. It's the digital revolution has just democratized things completely. But that being said, if you want the nukes, if you want the flames, if you want the base lights, those come with international prices. They don't give us discounts because our currency is in rands. We have to pay in dollars for that every year. So there is a base price that is unavoidable from our side. I hope that answers your question.
Can I jump onto that? Sorry. I think I asked this a bit before to say, what do we lack that international companies have or international post facilities have? And I know we've got the skill. And to his point, if we are paying in dollars to a different country to get a certain resource, is it possible for us to create our own so that we keep the money here? I'll
When we are looking at the base lights and we're looking at the very expensive flames and stuff like that, okay? Today's technology, there's some guys sitting here with IMAX or Max M1s, M2s, M3s, okay? We can do, when you're sitting and you're watching that final thing at the end of the day, how many base lights have you done that's gone through Resolve now, that is now basically free? Okay, it's capped at less than 4K, but you're working in 6K. It's cost you a minimal price, and then you put the artist behind that. So it's not just changing your mindset about doing, those little short films for the AFDA students and stuff like that. I think there's a bigger change that we need to look at. And I think Melissa spoke about it's the talent that drives these things. But if the technology is so old, because there's a lot of international films that's been made by guys sitting in a garage, like Chris Iverson, for instance, you might remember him, okay? He's sitting in Hollywood, and he's cutting top-notch stuff in his garage, right? So does that old technology that does not apply to us in South Africa, okay, still warrant the fact, because we want to come work with you, because you do sell the fact that you've got the talent, but we can also, as producers, step in to the other talent that is developed by itself. So it is not a hit at you. It's trying to understand the new technology that's come in. But when we've got to do bigger productions, I can't come to you because you can't do Foleys. That's what we found out. We can't do VFX with, let's call it a Wolverine changing into whatever it is. The guys that does rotoscoping the best in the world sits in India. Now, where are those talent within your house that we can offer that at amicable prices in South Africa?
We do Foleys, yeah. We do all that. Yeah. What is your post budget? What is your average post budget?
Well, it depends on what it is. But let's say South African budgets, the most we look at is about 10 million. When you start crossing over that, then you really start to fall within the privilege of where we can be. Because it's very difficult for us to make films in South Africa. So Foley's, we couldn't do Foley's. We did Foley's in-house, all right? We got charged, what was 270? About 273.20 to go and do it in Germany.
Well,
You know?
I'm 40% of that price.
Okay, that's good to know.
40% of that price.
Speak to Alastair.
That is good to know. Because one of the things, and we've spoken to so many other producers, what's killing us in South Africa? Number one, the cost of our crew. Okay, it's impossible to make a film because everyone must be paid. When it comes to post-production, and as soon as I put the green screen on, that price just shoots up.
But why are you putting the green screen on?
Because sometimes you do need the greens. I'm going to tell you something, all right? Let's talk about this green screen thing.
Am I off the hook now? Can we focus on the
Green screen, she asked me a question. So green screen, like for instance, we want to do a shoot through the Northern Cape on a train. There's not a single train running from Johannesburg up to Kakamas or wherever it is. How are you going to do that?
Green
Now
screen.
it comes to where?
That's fine, yeah.
You understand what I'm
I
saying?
get what you're saying. I think I want to circle back a little bit, and I think it may go slightly but against what you're saying. Like my experience as an offline editor for the last 20 years has been not in facilities. I feel like producers decimated facilities for a very long time by going in-house, pulling Final Cut Pros into their basements, essentially. And so the big facilities were mostly reliant on commercials and file away, and yes, offshoots, etc., etc. It's only since Netflix, in my opinion, came into the country in 2019 that the idea of having a post-production offline team with assistant editors working during the day, not at night, really came back into the picture. And so for that period of time, we weren't training people. Assistant editors weren't getting exposure to what it was like to be in the edit suite. They can't pull themselves up to become editors because they don't know what that means, because the editor was working on the computer in the basement during the day and they were sitting on it at night. So I think
You're right.
there's things that are at play here, you know, and I don't know how that's affected costing and pricing. I'm not a producer, I'm not a post supervisor, I don't work with budgets, but that is my observation of my career.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, our post facility does a lot of television. We do different series, we do feature films, and we do it with different production houses, right? And you're right, there are a lot of production houses that are starting up their own thing and having in-house to save costs, right? But I was speaking with a friend of mine the other day, Norman, and he was saying, look, if you look at post-production, it's also a problem-solving space, right? And because we work with different production houses and we find different challenges, and we approach the post-production in different ways to if you were to do it in-house, you will find that we're more effective as a post-production house. I'm not saying that your post-production in-house is not great, but I'm just saying because we deal with post-production, that's our specialization. As much as you are a producer, as much as you're a director, we are post. That's what we do. That's what we do best. So I think for us, it's our industry. In our industry, as professionals, I think that's what Melissa's trying to say. We're trying to safeguard that for ourselves as well, because we're not just doing it to save money for the producer. We're actually doing this because it's our craft, it's what we love to do, and we want to perfect it and do it to the best of our ability and also add value to the film or the production that you bring to us. I don't know if, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be an editor. I want to have a sustainable career as an editor. I want to see myself editing for another 20 years. I don't want to retire from editing. You don't have to retire. I mean, Anne Coates was 80-something in editing. Like, there's so many examples in the international space where filmmaking is not a career you retire from, but I am passionate about the art of editing, the craft of editing, and making it a safe space, not just from a health and safety point of view, safe space, but like a place where like creative thought can be experimental, can be open, it can be fun, but you're there to work and do the job.
You can make mistakes without a cost.
Yeah.
It's like,
and to make mistakes, like, it needs to be safe, and you need to have young talent seeing, like, what mistakes look like and how you fix them and rectify them so they can feel supported.
Can I also circle back to what the gentleman said and what I asked earlier? There is a skill set that producers go to in India that don't necessarily come here to South Africa.
Sure.
Are we missing the technology? I know sometimes the cost is higher in South Africa, and that's for obvious reasons because the technology is not ours. Are we able to create that for ourselves in South Africa, or is creating something like that way too expensive for us as an industry?
I would
no,
let
I
John-
definitely think we can do it. We can do it with
Yeah.
juniors and train them up, build a full pipeline of these guys.
I think to go back to the point of the like spend on a commercial versus a film, like
It's not the same
that,
economy,
yeah, it's not the same economy. So you don't write films with that in mind necessarily, but the expertise are here and they're doing it in commercials. Like Chocolate Tribe did creature effects in Number with the hyena, the talent's there, but maybe, and I don't have any way to speak with any authority, maybe the pricing is higher because it's a commercials avenue. It's not something that's done frequently enough in the long form space.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm speculating.
I think
here.
you're very right. I think within context, commercials are not the same as long form.
But commercials also funded research,
Yeah.
funded R&D, funded infrastructure. They couldn't have done that hyena without doing that checkers ad with the orangutan.
Sure,
You
and the Chicken Licken ad
And
with
the-
the robot.
yeah.
And yeah,
I think,
so it's-
so sorry to cut you off. So the difference between commercials and long form is that someone is going to go buy Valpre and they buy it every single day. It's not often that someone purchases something to do with our industries every single day. So brands usually deal with bigger budgets than with long form. So for commercials, you do get a bigger budget versus in long form. Sometimes the budgets are smaller. And I don't think it's because we want them to be smaller, but it's just brands actually make way more revenue than we do in a short space of time. Not that the money's not there, but it's just a different economy altogether. With commercials, like we said, voice artists have specific rates that they have. With actors, there's usage and performance fees that you pay that are standardized within the industry. If it's going to play online in South Africa or in a different region, even in the world, there's specific percentages that you pay for actors and performers and voiceover artists. So that's a different context altogether from long form. Whereas in long form, it's a different story. When we are tackling story and who you're going to have crew, yes, you still shoot, but it's a different, I think it's a different form of content versus long form.
Commercials have also taken a massive dive. Like with social media and stuff, no one's getting the budgets that they were, in the Key Throws days and that kind of thing. They'll rather give 10 million rand, they'll spread it over 20 influencers than doing, the traditional kind of campaign. So no one's really making money off these commercials.
So I think there's a question I missed. Sorry, sir. I will take you as the last question, then we'll take the final comments.
I'm trying to bring it back to post-production. So I know you saw me earlier on speaking about guerrilla filmmaking, but when I start a movie, one of the first people I call is Answa at the Refinery. Why? First and foremost, of the firewalls, their protection that they give me when my product is there. All my movies cannot be found in the darknet because they've been protected. And that's the most important thing. The moment the card comes out of the camera, post-production starts. Mm-hmm. And that's every single day. On my set, it's very simple. It goes to the DIT. From the DIT, I have an assistant editor who then syncs the sound, and then in the evening, overnight, an editor does a assembly. So in the morning, we can have a look and see what we shot and whether we need to do a retake or whatever needs to be done. So that is my normal workflow on a normal set. Editing, a great editor changes a movie because they have the ability. A director has the director's cut, but the editor finishes it. And I'll never forget, Mandy Roberts was my editor. And she calls me, she said, I have an idea about this one scene. And I said, what? She says, I want to take it out. And I said, okay, do a cut and send it to me. I always have Control Z. And I went along with her because she was right. And we do pickups, maybe even a year later, because pickups are important. With me, even on a low budget, I have focus groups. I show my movie before grading or anything to a group of people who have got nothing to do with movies. And I take their points, and then we go back and we fix. So editing, post-production may take a year or maybe more. If it's done, and then after we lock picture, then only we give it to the engineers, for the composer, we give it to the sound editor to do Foley and things like that. It's at that point only, after locking picture. And then we have the time, and then finally we send it to Refinery for final mix, color grading, and finishing off. And that is it, and it's not about the price. Answa will tell you, I fight her. Good. Right? It's not about the price. It's about, this is what I want, this is what I got. Yes or no? And it's always, that's a question. It's a yes or no question. Most of the time, they will say yes, because that's how it is. And at the end of the day, an editor is one of the most important people in a movie. They can define a movie. They will find bits and pieces in front of the clapper, after the cut. They will put all these things together to make sure your movie is good. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to take final remarks. We are over time a bit, and I know people need to go for lunch. Go, Tunde.
I just want to...
You can go.
Okay, I just want to quickly... Me or someone else? Okay. Yeah. I just want to quickly comment. On what the gentleman mentioned earlier on. I'll give you a very simple analogy. Is if you don't know how to drive really fast, you shouldn't buy a Ferrari because it's a fast car. So what's the point of buying it? I think when we consult with post-production professionals, they can easily advise on what tools to use. I know everybody, you must have heard about, there's a Nuke, but there's also an After Effects if you can't afford Nuke. Nuke is quite expensive and it's crazy expensive. Maybe the solution you needs an After Effects. Use After Effects. Maybe the solution you need doesn't need Baselight, it needs DaVinci Resolve. It's fine. But then these post facilities can actually advise because they also have experience under their belt. One thing that is happening in this industry is we learn, especially post-production professionals or the younger ones that are coming up, they learn the bad habits quickly, and then the bad habits gradually becoming the norm. And producers, they see something fantastic, it's like, oh, it's really good. But then when you really look at it, compared to what you envision your project to look like, which is, say, Hollywood, and you see there's a difference. Like, it's not really looking like it, but you don't know the reason why it's not looking like Hollywood. So these people, us on this panel and every other professional that we have out there, they have the experience and they've dealt with a lot of those things. We're not really, I don't think an editor, I don't think the first thing that will come out of an editor's mouth will be, yes, we can edit on Premiere Pro for you, or we should edit on Avid. It's, yes, you have an edit that you need to do. Okay, I need to tell a story. Regardless, I once supervised a team that were using completely different softwares. Final Cut Pro, because there's an old editor who doesn't want to move to Avid. I supervised an editor using Final Cut Pro, a younger editor using Avid, and then another editor using Premiere Pro. And they worked seamlessly together. So regardless of what they are all cutting a story. They all want to do a project. They also want to tell a story. So leave the technology to us, leave the brainstorming on how to solve the problem to us. Trust us enough to say, okay, I want to tell the story. I want my film to look blue. Great, we'll make it look blue. I want it to look brown. Great, make it look brown. Let us go find out how to make it look brown. Thanks.
Closing remarks, Alastair?
I just think post-production is a partnership. It's give and take. We're willing to give our time. If you guys are willing to play fair as well, if the expectations are realistic and we can come to a middle ground, we're totally open to negotiate. We don't have a set rate, like I said. We do have overheads that we need to cover, but yeah, we play nice, and we treat each project on a per project basis. There's no rate card, unfortunately. I wish there was, but yeah.
Do you have any? Yes.
No, I'm just open to working on projects that I can enjoy, because I invest so much creative, intellectual, emotional energy into them. And so it's about being in an environment that's collaborative and making good product, good stories.
Yeah, I can just say, 1410th has also been around for a very long time. We've been running for 20 years. Almost similar to what the gentleman was saying at the back. They're starting out small, but obviously growing throughout the years, But again, because of the budgets, our growth doesn't happen as quickly as we'd want it to, but we are still grateful for the journey. And we are still a humble company. We again, like what Alastair was saying, there's nothing too big or too small. Things are negotiable. We're currently cutting, Ntokozo's in the background there, we're currently cutting his short film. He came with us, you can imagine, with not any of a budget. I'm actually doing the edit, and I'm a senior editor. It's going through the whole process of color grading on DaVinci. It's going to get final mixed on Avid. It's got, his composers are writing a song. We treat every project the same. Do you know what I mean? So I think we just love post-production, and we love the fact that you guys the producers we respect, and the directors we love, because they create, they bring it to us, and we keep the care and the love for the product alive.
Thank you so much to our lovely panel. From what I hear from you guys, don't fix it in post. Let's start in the beginning. Let's start in the beginning. I think there is, with how things are evolving over time with the digital age, I do see the industry grow. I hope to see the technology that we see in India, in South Africa, for the industry to go bigger and better than what we have. Thank you so much, guys, for your time, and thank you to our audience.
Much as we grab a photo of you on stage. Thank you. All right, everybody, as they're doing the photographs on stage, we're going to take a lunch break and come back here at 2:30 for our closing panel, the one that kind of finishes it all off and answers the reason why we've been here for 2 days. So if we can be back here at 3:30, I really appreciate everyone at the offices and at home. Please also do take a lunch break for yourself, but please also come back here at 3:30, and then we can close off. We're going to have lunch upstairs in the terrace that we had yesterday for everyone here, and I'll see you back at 3:30. Thank you so much.